Good morning, everyone. My name is Alix Adrien, and I'll be the moderator to this panel discussion. The theme for our panel conversation tonight will be on supporting English minority education in Quebec. In particular, we will look at the agreement on collaboration between key community agencies on the construction of a Black community archive system in Quebec. To frame the panel discussion, I thought this quote would best express the consensus that exists in our community. It is our opinion that communication network centers, such as the Concordia Archive, can be designed as part of a strategic planning process to increase the capacity of minority communities for creating, in a timely manner, the ingenuity required for solving problems of social, political, and economic exclusion, thus for promoting sustainable development and improving objective and subjective well-being. On this note, allow me to introduce quickly the two panelists. First, Dr. Clarence Bayne is well known in the Concordia education system. He has obtained a PhD from McGill University, where in economics, specializing in econometrics, monetary, and macroeconomics theory. Dr. Bayne is the director of the Institute for Community Entrepreneurship and Development. His research interest is very cross-disciplinary with an emphasis on community development. He has received several distinguished awards and recognition for his work in community development from the federal and municipal government, as well as various community-based organizations, as well as being the chair of the Secretariat for the Black Community Forum. He's also the president of the Black Studies Center of Montreal and the Black Community Resource Center. Our next panelist is Désirée Rochat. She's a PhD graduate in educational studies at McGill University. Her work is based on an integrative approach that merges community development, research, education, and heritage preservation by fostering partnership between stakeholders. She has had over 20 years of experience in the community, the non-for-profit sector. She has recently been hired as a research in residence at the Concordia Library, which is actually very timely for this particular panel discussion. She's also the program director of the Observatory des communautés noires, which is a Quebec Black community observatory of the umbrella organization called the Sommet. The observatory, a goal is to emerge a bridge of research and community work to make an accurate diagnosis of the situation of Black young people in Quebec and to propose concrete solutions adapted to their a reality. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Bayne.
Well, I must thank the QUESCREN and you, Mr. Adrien, for inviting me to present at this seminar. It is a very important seminar because we have been wondering a little bit in the forest, trying to connect these different parts. We're going to really address situation within the context of what is referred in the literature on complex adaptive systems as a human, economic, and social system. And this sort of system is what we would describe as complex. It's dynamic, therefore it has qualities of being adaptive. It consists of, we'll treat it as a system consistent, that is the economy and landscape, as a system consistent of networks of live and non-live agents interacting and responding to continuous change in the agents in the system itself, and changes also in the system. It's a very peculiar situation in the fact that it could be very confusing because change in any agent causes changes in another agent. And the change in, that causes a change in the system as a whole, the interrelated network causes that to change. And the change in the network itself causes individual organizations, which we call, and individuals and landscapes, which we refer to as the agents. It causes them to change. So it's a system that is continuous change and at different rates at different points of the landscape. In this system, the human being is the intelligent agent capable of thought and making innovative responses aimed at maximizing its objective and subjective well-being. That's meant for function, to live, to be happy, and to be happier as long as possible. We are concerned in this presentation here with changes which are a result of the combining of factors that produce utility. That is to say, factors that satisfy needs and solve problems specific to our objectives, the objective of the human species. And the diagram that follows presents this system in a sort of geometric kind of sense context as a belief space and a population space. The belief space is where knowledge of all kinds is stored, and there are two types of knowledge that is considered here: situational, which is more fixed, and normative, which is more qualitative and much more variable, right? The activity is the population set, is where all the activity of the specific agent, that is the human species, is carrying out its activities to meet its objectives, to satisfy its needs, and in doing that, it uses resources available in the space, the physical space it occupies, that is the earth or the country, if you want to call it that, the ecosystem or biosphere. These are several names that's used to refer to it. You will see, therefore, in the second diagram, that the belief space and population space. The belief space, therefore, is the brain of this, of the economy or the landscape that we're in. This is where patterns, which are cause and effect indicators, that's sensed in the data, is created by the interaction between the different agents, where this data is collected, processed, stored, and becomes knowledge, knowledge which is useful and solve the kinds of problems and meet the needs. We call it wisdom. So this is where the wisdom of the system this is where the activity towards the generating, making the system act efficiently is stored. In the model above, the central purpose of the population, as I said earlier, is the following, and it's important to remember this. The population, which is the humans, individuals, is their purpose is survival, reproduction, security, and to be as happy as long as possible. That is to maximize your social and your psychological well-being. That's the purpose of that's what the activity in this, the actual physical action, operations or productions, as we call it, takes place towards that end. Can you move to the next slide, please? That is this slide that you hear, Montreal and Quebec as a complex adaptive system or human and social ecosystem, is just a reproduction of the previous slides. You could see that it's just put in a much more, in a way that we are accustomed to see things. So I was saying this two subset system that was produced in more earlier on is being placed in a context of, that we are more accustomed to think about. We carry out activities, households, provide the labor and other services in the market to produce goods and services, and which are then distributed in certain kinds of ways back to households and to organizations, as well as to governments. So you have firms and organizations are considered agents, and they are the producers of goods and the providers of services, using factors of production, which could be labor, aspects of the environment, such as iron ore, water, etc., to produce the goods and services which are in a market system selected to provide needs, to satisfy needs or solve problems. Now, that's a mechanical system, but the fact that we have the human agent functioning there that has thought, or the capacity for thought and imagination of incredible proportions and directions, we have either good things happening, that is, everybody receiving all the things that they need and they are as happy as possible, but that does not happen that way. Essentially, that people make choices or can make choices and decisions which are beneficial to them, but not beneficial to others, which make them very present, active, and satisfied, but they do it by taking away the rights and the opportunities of other sectors. So you have, we have evolved a value system, which then, and that value system is being put into place from the belief system. It's normative. What is right to do? What is not right to do? What makes sense? What does not make sense? What the rights and wrong concepts and equality and concepts of equality, concept of democracy, all of those things are worked out in the dynamics of this system, and that's what this is supposed to represent, right? The Black community of Montreal has for over 100 years been trying to get private, public, and Canadian and Quebec archivists to upgrade their collections on the presidents as they relate to to give the Black population a greater presence and to reflect the contributions and history of Black people in the country. That's the whole has been almost the purpose of and reactions of the Black population to the dominant mainstream populations over endless years in this country. It has been actually essentially 100 years that Blacks were sort of disappeared from the landscape from 1863, that's at emancipation, and until 1963, we were shut out of the country almost systematically, and Quebec being one of the places that it was action to bar Blacks from being here or to ignore Black populations. It's been well identified by scholars like Robin Winks and other persons. However, the massive increase of Black immigrants to Quebec and Canada as a whole in the early 60s reopened the debate on the strategies for nation building. That is, what kind of people and what do we want this country to look like? And how do we arrange this immigration of Blacks to the country coming as a result of our negotiations in post-war period with with Britain and the United States and other European countries and the Caribbean and Africa in itself. It became increasingly, this debate evolved and to the extent that it became increasingly clear that the instruments and structures for the creation and storage of knowledge and histories had to become more inclusive and race-based. So yes, continuing from the in the earlier slide, I was making the point that over time and with the occurrence of certain sorts of events, with the changes in the relationships between nations, etc., it became very obvious that we had to opt for a society in which we had information about as many subgroupings of the population as possible. Even if we didn't want to do it, it became necessary for our own security. When I say we, I'm not referring to myself as to me as one of the possessors of power and capacity to make these decisions. But it became clear that if a group in the population was exposed to certain kinds of illnesses, that we could not disregard it, because these viruses, et cetera, and diseases, et cetera, were transferable as between the human beings. And therefore, for our own security, we had to make sure that we had more information about everybody, and we had to take into consideration how we were distributing goods, services, and opportunity. That was for our own security. Someone referred to it as the boomerang effect. If your neighbor is sick and you don't care about it, you might find yourself suffering in many different kinds of ways. Either he cannot provide you with the services that he or she used to provide because of illness, or he or she has an illness or disease or sickness or some kind of defect that is transferable to you. So we needed to solve the problem of mosquitoes in Africa for the reason that we wanted to be there to get the gold, the silver, and all these other things of wealth, material things. And we needed to solve the problem of the Ebola because we were traveling backward and forward between Africa, morning, day, and night, we was as equally exposed, but in that sense, and we could not disregard the fact that some people were more prone to get the COVID virus, and we can say, well, that's not our problem because that virus is transferable across the population, and we live in proximity to these people. So that interaction between the human species, other animals, the environment, etc., and each other made it essential that we begin talking more seriously about a more cohesive and a more equitable and a more caring society. And that's where we are now in this situation. The attempt, therefore, on behalf of the Black community to address this population, to even get that information for their own self-preservation and for meeting their own objectives, meant that we began to put pressure on existing structures and mechanisms that were created by groups with the capacity to produce these mechanisms. And maybe we haven't thought about it in this way always, but libraries, archives, museums, artifacts that we keep, they store information, they store knowledge, and it is important that it was important, therefore, that we either create these information points or these within our own communities, or we used those mechanisms and structures that existed in other societies or in other to the collective advantage. So coming out of the efforts that we have made to have our, to have our history known, to have our contributions known, to have to agree to have our location and numbers known, to share personal information about our health and physical vitality, etc. To have to share that information, use the channels through either our own channels or other people's channels in order to share that information, became a point of really our existence. The result of this these initiatives from the Black community to have access to this and the capacity to respond effectively to outcomes, the hospitality outcomes in the community or negative outcomes, is that we begin to work with each other. This history of the linkages mapped out here is just to indicate how organizations came into being in the Black community to take, specifically to do those things. For instance, like they have the Colored Women's group created the Negro Community Center, which was both concerned with the physical and survival needs of the community. Then they also found that it was necessary to have a psychosocial or health, good spiritual health. So they created the Union United Church. The Union United Church then became very involved in trying to present not just spiritual in the sense of a relationship with God, but spiritual in the sense of social relationships, created a number of organizations. The immigration situation is viewed on this side here, where Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, etc., Haiti, they came in and found that they had to become immediately involved in creating structures that will enable them either to provide the things they need or to receive services. That led to the creation of more upper level agencies such as the Black Community Resource Center, the Black Theater Workshop for its cultural, the Quebec Border Black Education for ensuring and guaranteeing the education and learning that would enable them to take care of, to provide for themselves. So that's what this diagram is here. But it's what we have found out is that they are doing that, but they're doing that in an individual basis. Each one of those organizations are trying to do all of those things together. And we could benefit from the trade theory, for instance, which says that if I specialize in the things that I can do best and you specialize in the things that you can do best, and we exchange our surpluses, we will both have more goods and services and be happier. That's where we are right now. We are trying to come together to knit these organizations together as working collectively, interactively and collectively, as opposed to individually trying to do everything to provide the need for their particular group. So we are in these, we have, the organizations can be divided into 3 stages. They're looking at the past and looking at what has not worked and to see how they can fix it. But that again requires that they collaborate with existing structures that have the capacity to do that. And then the present situation is one in which we're trying to talk to each other, to collaborate more effectively in bringing about these changes that we think, and from that, we're trying to change things in the future. So that's where we are at. And it seems as though what we really need is to have some persons employed that are going to assist in bringing these organizations, that at least their history and their past and the information about them it together in one place so that we can view not pieces and bits, but everything, and get more information and make better decisions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bayne, for such an enlightening presentation. And now Désirée.
So, hi everyone, my name is Désirée Rochat. I'm a community educator, and I'm currently the program director of the Black Communities Observatory. So today I'll explain a little bit the historical roots of the Observatory and then describe its emergence and objectives. So as Dr. Bayne has just explained, Black communities in Montreal have, since the beginning of the century, created institutions to address their educational, professional, political, and social needs. Though legal segregation didn't exist in the city, what scholars have called the Call Line prevented Black community members from accessing certain institutions and services. From associations to centers, community-based institutions provided, and I mean have provided and still provide, Black community members with resources that they could not access otherwise. Through their work, one of the key things that these groups also provided was access to knowledge. To a knowledge that Black community members not only couldn't necessarily access elsewhere, but most importantly, to a knowledge that couldn't be found anywhere else. A knowledge that spoke about their realities, their stories, and their aspirations. For instance, 3 of the first institutions of the 20th century built libraries for their members. The Union United Church, founded in 1907, started with a library for its Sunday school, which then evolved into a bigger Black library in the 1930s. It aimed at engaging youth and adults with their cultural history. The United Negro Improvement Association, founded in 1919, also had what it called a Black library, inaugurated in 1920, 2 years before the Montreal Public Libraries. Scholar June Bertley noted that the library, believed to be the first Black library established in Montreal, contained books on African history and African heroes to tell Blacks of their heritage and contribute to their self-improvement and self-identity in keeping with the general UNIA philosophy. In later years, it was the turn of the Negro Community Center to also establish a library for its members. The importance of these Black libraries was crucial because they served as knowledge base for community members, both young and old. These members knew that books by them and about them could not be found in institutional or municipal libraries. They knew that if they wanted to read authors who wrote about their realities, they had to build these knowledge repertoires themselves. Libraries were not only understood as book collections, but most importantly, were key tools for the community and political work that Black community members had to do to improve their collective living conditions. The sort of ecosystem work that Dr. Bayne was speaking about. So the knowledge held in these libraries was thus also to support community members in their quest for social transformation. Knowledge is actually an important component of political participation, as we know. Access to knowledge, the production of knowledge, and the preservation of knowledge are key for people to exercise their rights and actively participate in both the formal and informal life of their societies. It is because of this, and because of their historical underrepresentation in institutions that preserve and organize knowledge, like libraries and archives, and in institutions that produce knowledge, like universities and research centers, that Black community members have taken upon ourselves to build institutions to provide us with the knowledge needed for our political and community work. Over the years, in addition to the libraries, many groups also developed their own research projects. These projects helped them better understand the realities of their constituents to guide programming and activities, or to develop advocacy campaigns and lobby for political change. For instance, La Maison d'Haïti, a Haitian community-based organization, developed research projects from its inception since the 1970s. And so these first projects were on housing and integration and helped them frame the needs of their community members to be able to cater to them. In the 70s as well, the Black Studies Center was founded, in which Dr. Bayne was involved. In the 1980s, the NCC did an investigation with Black groups all over the city, including La Maison d'Haïti, to better understand the changing demographics and therefore the changing needs of Black communities. And so whereas community libraries before provided community members with a kind of knowledge base, community-based research aimed to go one step further and produce knowledge that could serve community members. There is thus in Montreal a historical tradition of knowledge-centered initiatives and institutions. One of these newest initiatives is the Socio-Economic Summit for the Development of Black Youth. The summit was initially created as an annual event in 2017 by Black community members who wanted to open a space to come together and address their concerns by pooling their experiences, expertise, and resources. Ultimately, the event also aimed at opening a space where community knowledge could be shared to kind of come forth and put forth real concrete solutions to community challenges. From that event emerged the idea of an institution that would continue to work towards the objective of pooling resources and knowledge and act as an umbrella institution regrouping Black community institutions in Quebec. This institution would therefore also provide kind of collective political leverage. And so the summit evolved from an event to an institution that now bears the same name. And so there's often a bit of a confusion because the Socio-Economic Summit for the Development of Black Youth is both an event that is held every January and an institution now which regroups 50 groups and associations and organizations that work with Black youth and their families. The annual community gathering remains the cornerstone of its activities, a moment where community members also come up with ideas and recommendations of new initiatives that could work towards the improvement of their socioeconomic realities. It is there that the idea of a research observatory emerged. The declaration of the initial summit made the mention of the need for a study committee that would focus on documenting and studying the challenges and realities of Black community members. In the following years, people felt that a committee wouldn't be enough and proposed the creation of a full-blown research center in the form of an observatory. In 2019, a team of community consultants was composed to conceptualize what this observatory would need to be and to do in order to have a concrete impact on the lives of Black community members. The goal was to envision an observatory where research and community development would feed one another constantly. And so during 2020, this team, which I had the chance to lead, worked with the team of the summit on building the kind of frame of what this observatory would look like. And though we had planned for community consultation and events that we had to set aside due to the COVID context, we still managed to develop the framework that was then submitted to funders in December of last year. And in April 2021, the Lucien André Chagnon Foundation pledged $4.8 million of our total $6 million budget for the next 5 years. And so in June this year, we launched the Black Communities Observatory. To truly bring the components of knowledge production, transmission, and mobilization for community development purposes, the observatory's work is guided by 4 strategic orientations, which, as you have seen historically, are not new, but that we're really trying to bring under one umbrella. It is, we're talking about research, education and training, community mobilization, and scientific dissemination. Our mission is to document and understand the issues facing youth from Black communities in order to propose concrete solutions that promote their development. And so research is understood here as a tool to really bring people together to reflect and think together again of solutions to change the social dynamics and structures that affect our lives. The observatory's activities are split into 2 programs that are further divided into the various axes. The research program with a socioeconomic focus and a youth focus, and the community development program, which is divided into 4 axes: community mobilization, education and training, communication, and political watch. The articulation of the 2 programs is what allows both community participation into the research component and the appropriation of research by community members. The research activities are anchored in our understanding that the collective production of knowledge is also necessary to inform and influence public policies and debates. What we really aim to favor through the activities that we are now engaging with is a collaborative approach to research, which is based on the recognition that though not everyone has the same role in a research project, everyone holds knowledge that can contribute to it. To ensure that multiple perspectives and knowledges inform our research, and I really say knowledge is plural here, the different themes we will address will be guided by research groups made of community workers, youth, and professional experts. The groups will work with the main researchers to identify the research subjects and ensure community input throughout the research process. And so this is the basis of a kind of community knowledge pooling through these research groups that will then inform and be furthered through the research activities, which then themselves will be connected to both the education activities and the mobilization, which will allow for the dissemination of the knowledge produced, and then for a feedback into the research. And so we're really approaching research and community development through an integrative approach. Knowledge preservation and production has been a key component of the political and community work of Black community institutions since the beginning of the 20th century. As I have shown, from community libraries to a Black Studies Center and various community-based research initiatives, Black community members have always known that our quest for social justice also needs to tackle the realm of knowledge. The Black Communities Observatory's ultimate goal is to produce, gather, and disseminate knowledge by Black communities for social transformation, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. And though it is the newest in a constellation of organizations, it is firmly aligned in a long history of knowledge-centered initiatives by Quebec's Black communities. And as such, it stands on the shoulders of giants.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Désirée. Do we have any question, comment? Yes, Cindy, please.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm very interested in understanding more of the way that the Black Community Observatory might function, and you went through the 4 areas. And so when you talk about scientific vulgarization, I know that means like knowledge transfer, and I'm just wondering, are there any plans to, because I work in a school system and I would be very interested in helping our youth who are Montrealers, Black Montrealers, understand what their community is all about. And so are there any plans to make this knowledge transfer applicable to elementary, high school, and even post-secondary students who might be interested in knowing more about the Black community in Montreal? I think it's a great initiative.
Yes, the Black, especially the Black community, English-speaking Black community, going all the way back to the early 60s. I could say that we have transformed the situation as it pertained to Black. When in the early 60s, there were about 5,000 Black people living in Montreal, most of whom lived in the Little Burgundy area. Of those 5, there were approximately something getting close to 1,000 Blacks from Africa, the Caribbean, and other places. Right? At the University of Quebec, at McGill, at the newly formed and evolving Sir George Williams, that's now known as Concordia. And we could not find more than 3 to 5 Blacks from the Little Burgundy area. And those 5 Blacks were at, 2 at McGill and 3 at Concordia. And so we asked the question, I don't think that we are that smarter than Blacks in Canada, that we can have 1,000 of us and only 3 of them, and when there's 5,000 living down the road from the university. And we found out the problems was essentially race superiority, racist attitudes towards Blacks was systemic discrimination. The fact that Blacks and Asiatics were kept out of Canada for almost 100 years between 1863 and 1960, when the changes started coming about, right? We are the Quebec Board of Black Educators engaged the PSBGM at the time, pointed out to them the reality that if 1,000 Blacks could come from countries that were colonized and in which the exchange rate was not to our favor, and survive, and not only survive, but to pay fees and go to school and finish. Why it is that the system, that both the English and French education system were not producing more scholars. Why did their scholars have to go to the States to get degrees? Because there were Black people from Canada born in Canada getting degrees. They went to the States to get the degrees. Why? And we opened up the situation as one is straight outright racist discrimination and the perpetuation and expansion of the notion that only whites were capable of creating civilization. And among those whites, there were only a smaller number of whites who were called Aryans that ever did it effectively and successfully. And that Black people were not considered. In other words, we did better than the Indians because they didn't try to send us blankets laced with smallpox. At least they didn't have the opportunity of killing our children and burying them in the front lawns.
We do have 1 minute, as I understand.
But we got those changes to take place. They acceded that there was a problem and worked with the Quebec Board of Black Educators to bring about significant changes. And over a period of 15 years, the failure rates was reduced significantly as a result of that intervention and that positive response of the English-speaking school board. Now
Thank you, Dr. Bayne. With 1 minute left, Désirée,
so
I'm going to give you the final comment.
Maybe I'll jump in just to loop. I think the answer is that, so the Observatory, like other Black community institutions before, and I think this is the takeaway of this, is like, well, the Observatory is a new institution, but that continues to do what other Black institutions have done before, which is, for example, engage in producing knowledge. And so our first aim is to work with our community constituents, so our community groups, to produce educational material that could serve also their needs. The second base and the second aim of the kind of education component of it will be to produce material that can serve also elsewhere. And so we haven't specifically yet targeted or planned to work for community institutions, educational institutions. But part of our objective is to produce material for anyone who works with Black communities and needs to better understand the historical context, the political context, and the changes that the community members themselves have kind of brought about. But please do reach out. I mean, we started in June, so the first year is really kind of the administrative aspect of laying the ground down. But I think that part of our role is also to disseminate what has been done, because community organizations have done this work for a very long time. There are, books and pedagogical material that have been produced. And I don't want to preach for my choir, but I know I was part of another collective that produced books on Caribbean history a few years ago. And so the goal is also to see how that knowledge that community has can be leveraged and then fed to bigger institutions. So we're definitely open to collaborations.
Cindy, just to finish, I sit on the board of the Observatory myself, so I'll be happy to make that connection so that the Lester B. Pearson is definitely one of the partners of the Observatory. And please enjoy the QScreen Vitality and a forum over the next 3 days.